demo screen. And what I'm showing here in my what browser am I running here? I don't even know. Chrome or Firefox, I think. But in my browser, I'm looking at the Information Analyzer Thin client. And my initial view here is my workspaces, or are my workspaces. And I want to draw your attention to, we're looking at tiles, representations of workspaces. And again, a workspace is just a logical collection of one or more files or tables that I want to analyze. And draw your attention to this first one called AA Relationships. There are 0 data sets in that workspace, so it's a brand new workspace. And then GDPR1 has 8 data sets. My goal here in the next few minutes, I'm going to add 2 new data sets to GDPR1, and I'm going to add about a half a dozen to relationships. I'm going to get those all analyzed. In my relationships, as the name might imply, I'm going to run the new relationship analysis, and within GDPR, I'm just going to run our normal analysis, which does both column analysis as well as data quality analysis. And then we'll talk a little bit later about some data rules. So first things first, I'm going to go find 2 files that I want to add to the GDPR1 project. GDPR, of course, is very interested in the data classification, so that's our main goal in that project. To add data sets to an existing workspace, or even to create a new workspace and add data sets to it, I go over to my connections section. And here I want to point out that I have a number of connections, but if I look at the connection type, I can see that some of them are related to HDFS, so I know they're connecting to Hadoop environments, and that could be IBM's Big Insights, could be Cloudera, Hortonworks. It's really your choice as to what Hadoop environment you're connecting to. And then one of these connections says engine tier, so it says file connector engine tier. So that's actually pointing to my, in my case, my Linux engine environment where Information Analyzer is running. So I'm going to click on that engine tier and just browse to where I know my colleague has provided a file that needs to be analyzed and checked for privacy-sensitive data. And I'm literally just within the thin client, I'm navigating and I'm finding the file in question. It's this one called, my colleague told me to go to this directory, which is our common landing directory for new files like this, new data sets. I found the file as advertised, and I can actually hit a preview and take a look at it. And in this case, I'm glad I did take a preview because we can see that the first row looks like column names, but we haven't detected that. So I can correct that very quickly. Just click the checkbox to say first row is a header row, and then inspect the data, and it looks good to me now. So I hit the Add to Workspace button. Here I have the choice of creating a net new workspace if I have the privileges to do so, but we know I want to add this to my GDPR project and hit Submit. So I've just added the first of 2 new data sets I'm going to for my GDPR project. This one, of course, we saw was from the engine tier connector. The second data set I want to add is already in my catalog, meaning it's known to XMeta. It's known, it was imported perhaps through IMAM. It's known to the Information Governance Catalog. I know that it exists. I know the name of it. We provide numerous ways to filter the catalog of data sets, the catalog of known data sets. And it's really, this is any data set known to the information server. And I know I have one out here of interest to me that has the words DC Bank in the name. So I just hit search. And sure enough, there's my data set. And if I take a quick look at it under workspaces, I see it has no affiliation with a workspace. So it's not in any workspace. So I'm going to simply click on it and once again add it to my GDPR workspace and hit Submit. So 2 methods: browse a local file system, found a file, onboarded it, and in this case I searched my catalog, found a second data set, onboarded it into that project. And remember, the last thing I wanted to do is add some files or data sets to my relationship workspace. For that, I'm going to go to my Big Insights environment. In very similar paradigm, I'm going to, well, exact paradigm. I'm going to browse through my browse to where I know that my files are. So in the bank 4 directory, I have about a half a dozen files here. And you saw me before. Oh, I got that error just the other day. I'm going to start with a little different set of files. Well, I'll come back to that here in a second. We'll go back to the workspaces, and on the workspace side of the house, I want you to notice on the GDPR side where I added those 2 data sets that it now says there are 10 data sets rather than 8, as we would expect. We'll go into that, and since this is the first time we're looking at the what we call the workspace overview screen, we'll take a second and look at the tiles here. We can see that of the 8 data sets that were here before I added the 2, the analysis has been run on them, and we have a series of data classifications that were found and selected. We can see city, 11 columns across 8 or so data sets that have data that appears like city, a number 9 that have like U.S. state codes, and we can see zip codes, and even 5 columns that look like they contain U.S. Social Security numbers. So very important for PII to identify those. We also see in this hypothetical world that all of my data is of pretty high quality, in the 90 to 100% data quality range. If some of these data sets more typically had poorer quality, we would certainly see those represented. And on that bar, we see that 7 of our data sets are of that quality level. So if I drill in, and by the way, I can see where I am in my process. I can see that relationship analysis has run. Quality analysis has run on 7 of the 10. 3 are not analyzed, 7 are analyzed, and whether or not key relationships have been run. But let's drop in and view all of the data sets. And I really want to take a quick look at the 2 that we just onboarded, customer list 1 and DC bank accounts, and I want to go ahead and get those analyzing. So I simply say run quality analysis on both of those, run quality analysis. And the other thing I want to point out here, we have this one data set that says bank accounts. And I get this question quite a bit. I actually analyzed the bank accounts table in the old client, in the IA workbench. Yet when we come in here, and I purposely did not reanalyze it here in the thin client, although it says a data quality score and it just shows 2 dashes, if we click on bank accounts, we can see that if we go to, for instance, pull up data classes, it has the analysis that ran in the old client. The results are here and available in the thin client. So we can see all the data classifications that were selected and found. If I drill into a particular column like city, we can see that it has a data class of city selected. There are 69 distinct values. We get min, max, format, frequency distribution. So all of the column analysis that you ran in the IA workbench is available to view in the thin client. You don't have to rerun that analysis. Now, you won't have the quality scores because that's something new in the thin client, but you'll still have, as I just showed, all of your data classifications and many of the other assets, and many of the other properties that column analysis creates for you or determines for you. Of course, the data quality tab is going to say that there's no information because the analysis hasn't run. Well, that's the data quality analysis that's unique to the thin client. Just wanted to point that out, that the hard work you've done in the old client is all brought forward and preserved in the thin client. And we can see while I was speaking that the DC bank accounts and the customer list have completed their analysis. Now I'm going to go back to our workspaces and see if I can bring in my half a dozen Hadoop. These are Hadoop HDFS files. We'll give that one more try. not, we'll go straight to the rules part of the demonstration here. Okay, so I want to show that I can multi-select, in this case 7 files, and I'm going to say add to workspace. Previously I just, I previewed the one file, added it to a workspace. Here I'm going to add it to my relationships workspace. I'll hit submit. So you have the ability to add singleton files. In this case I bulk selected 6 or 7 files. You can also highlight a directory level and it'll select all the files within that directory. I get a nice feedback message here telling me success, data sets added to my workspace. So if I go back over to the workspace, we can see now that the AA relationships workspace indeed has 7 data sets that I just added. And my goal for this project, for this workspace, is simply to run the new relationship analysis. So I'm going to skip running. I'm not going to run data quality analysis. I'm going to go straight to relationship analysis just to demonstrate that you can do that. You don't have to run column analysis. You don't have to run data quality analysis. Here's the 7 data sets. One of the things that we introduced in Rollup 7 is, of course, we're looking right now at the tile view, which is very informative. But we introduced the list view, which I think you'll find also to be very productive. In this case, I want to run relationship analysis. This button here that says relationships is going to show me the results of relationship analysis. In order to run relationship analysis, I have to select 2 or more data sets. Does it make sense to look for relationships within one? So as soon as I select any 2 or more, I can see the option that says run key relationship analysis. In my case, I want to just say select all and say run key relationship analysis. And when I do so, I could just hit analyze and I'm off to the races. But I always want to see how many combinations of columns deep are we going to analyze. So by default, it would look at all combinations of 2 columns. So think of it as composite keys, if you will. And I like to bump that up to 3, just for a little more thoroughness, and hit analyze. And we'll come back to that in a minute. I get a nice feedback message saying that we're searching for relationships. And if I go back to the workspace overview level, I can see in my activity screen that the key relationship analysis is in progress for 7 data sets. So I'll get nice feedback that that's going on, and we'll come back and check on that momentarily. The other thing I wanted to show you in today's demonstration is around our data rules. This was introduced a couple of governance roll-ups back, but it's worth demonstrating. For that, I'm going to go to my project here called JKLW DBS Profiling. This is where I've got a little project spun up for my KYC, my Know Your Customer project. I can see right from the workspace tile, that there's 6 data rules associated with one or more of the data sets within this workspace. So that's the one I want to work with. And indeed, I can see this is a more representative workspace. Again, we can see all the data classifications that were found. This is a more realistic spread of data quality across the data sets. I have one data set in the 70 to 80% quality range, and several that are in the very poor quality range. Those were probably either empty tables or some other type of error that we'd have to investigate. But I can see that I have 6 data rules, and that last time they were executed, 5 of them were successful, and one of them probably hasn't run at all. It says not started. One other thing before we go into rules I want to show. There's this new little gear, if you will, over next to the workspace name. This is a little gear, a little cog, and this is the beginning of our workspace settings, workspace parameters. And initially, we have our sampling settings here. So, and this is going to be universal for any and all analysis activity that occurs for this project. Say from now on, once I make this change, if I say use sampling, and I want to do, say, a 20,000 record sample, and I can choose the different sampling methods. And these are exactly the same type of sampling methods that we had previously. So I might do the very fast one that says just do the first X number of rows. So in this case, it would be select first 20,000 if it were a SQL table. or read the first 20,000 rows of a flat file. And you also have the every nth, where you can specify every fourth record for 20,000 records. That's a decent sampling method. Or of course you can do the random sampling, where you provide a seed value and the percentage of records that you want to sample. Once I set this, and by the way, I have to be a project administrator role in order to set this setting. Once I set it, it's in effect now for all the analysis that I do. So if I set this, every future data quality analysis that I run will be subjected to these sampling settings. So this is a way today for a project administrator to maybe turn loose a bunch of business users on 100 or so data sets, but have some level of comfort knowing that they can only do, they're sort of in a playpen where they can only do sampling, right? I'm going to cancel out of this and go back to talk about rules. So just know that little cog, that little setting button is there. And of course we're going to bring, the goal of course is to bring all of the settings in the IA Workbench project properties to bear on that same screen we just saw. I'm going to go to view all the data sets. I'm going to switch back to my tile view. And I want to concentrate on this bank accounts data set, because I see there's 5, this little icon indicates to me there's 5 rules that have bindings to one or more of the columns in bank accounts. So as we go into bank accounts, we can see at the data set level, at the top level, we have a dedicated area here around rules. We can expand that. We can see the names of those who are familiar with the paradigm in Information Analyzer. There's always a data rule definition, and then you create one or more data rules using the data rule definition. It's the data rule definition that has the logic. So here we see the data rule definitions. Data exists, bank balance, valid US SSN. And if I drill into those, I see the data rules that were created from those definitions. So there's a rule called data quality rule underscore accounts valid US tax ID that is really that expression that you see just above it. We can see that that's on the Social Security number column. So if I scroll down to the Social Security number column, I can see it there as well. I can see that it ran just a little while ago, and that of the 466 records met, and there were 22 records that did not meet. And if we go, and I want to show one other one here on one other rule, and that is the rule where the expression is very simple. The source data has to be greater than or equal to 0, and it's on the column number of years of loyalty. That one had 5 exceptions, if you will, 5 records that did not meet that condition. I want to show on this little selector button here, I can actually run that rule right now. I can view it in the Information Governance Catalog, or I can view it in the information or in the Data Quality Exception Console, which I'm going to go ahead and do. When I click on that, it goes ahead and filters on that rule. We'll zoom in, wrong way. We'll zoom in a little bit so we can read, but focuses on that rule. And if I sort it by date, we can see there, sure enough, yesterday, well, last evening at 11:45 p.m., I fired off this rule, and indeed there's 5 exceptions. So if we click on that, we get a little more metadata about the rule execution itself. And more importantly, if I have the permission to do so, I can say view records and actually see the 5 records that failed our quality check logic there. And this can, of course, be if this rule itself or the project that the rule executed in is being monitored, this exception itself would actually flow into our workflow process, into our BPM workflow process. And that's how many of our clients, probably many who are listening right now, they're actually doing an end-to-end data quality monitoring and remediation process, or at least reporting and notification process. When an Information Analyzer rule like this finds exception records, they go directly to the individual or the department that should evaluate that and perhaps even correct it. So we'll switch back to where we were in the thin client. The one other thing I wanted to show is, we saw it earlier, but we can jump to the governance catalog on any one of these rules. When I do that on that Social Security number rule, I can see more detail about the rule itself, and in fact, the rule is part of a policy. We've got a policy. We've got a policy. Well, we've got a rule that's part of a policy that simply says all Social Security numbers must meet a certain format. That's a textual rule, a documentation rule, if you will, but it is supported by this actual executable rule that we just saw within Information Analyzer. And we can see the bindings of what this rule is, the columns that this rule is bound to, and indeed it's that Social Security number column, and we can see the history of the runs. So wanted to, quick demonstration on how tightly integrated we are between Information Analyzer, Information Governance Catalog, and of course the Data Quality Exception Console with respect to really all of the objects, all of the analysis, and certainly the data rules that we just showed. Last, I want to show you how quick and easy it is to add a new data rule to a column. I'm just going to pick on this first column here called City. I see that it has no data rules associated with it now, so I'm going to hit the Add Rule button here. I'm going to create a data rule. I'm going to find a very simple one. It simply says field exists. So it's a very simple logic. I'm going to take my city column, drag it here, hit next. I'm going to name my rule. I could give it a description, hit next. And I'm already, I want to choose any columns on the output side, so I want my record ID number to appear along with the city column, the city data value itself. I hit next. We can see that there was this little breadcrumb on the left-hand side telling me the steps that I just went through. I'm actually in a position now where I can test this rule, and it tells me that it does a quick 100-row test. Tells me that 100 of my 100 rows met my condition, 0 did not meet the condition. So I get instant feedback that I've used, a valid rule against this column, and it's executing fine. And when I hit done, I've created now a new rule. We can see it here under the Rules tab on the City column. And what you'll see is a little representation here that the quality score for the City column is grayed out, a little yellow triangle there indicating that the quality score needs to be reevaluated because of some change. In this case, the change was that I added a rule. So very quickly, a couple steps is adding a new data rule to a column here. We're going to go back. The last thing we want to look at in the demonstration before we open up questions and answers, we'll go back to that relationships table where I added the 7 data sets. Remember, I didn't run column analysis or data quality analysis. I was really just going to go look at relationships. And when I look at my status here, indeed that all 7 of those data sets are analyzed. So when I click on relationships, I get 2 very interesting things here. At the top side of the screen, I get a little diagram, and we'll zoom in on it here momentarily. I get a little diagram representing my relationships. And I might concentrate on a particular table here. Let's say this one here is sales.csv. And if we look at the links, for instance, to the customer CSV table, if I double click on any of these links, it will highlight in the lower part of the screen the list view of the relationships. And we'll kind of read it from left to right. The sales table or data set has a column called Salesman ID. That seems to be 100% in common with the sales ID column in the customer table. And it's a nice relationship in both directions. 100% of the child data values have links back to the parent table and vice versa. That's a high confidence, 100% on that relationship. If I I can actually come in here and modify these. If I select a relationship, I might determine that that's just noise, that's not a real relationship. I can actually remove the relationship, but more importantly, and more commonly, I can set the status to something. I can demote it from a selected relationship to a candidate relationship or a rejected relationship. So I still, as an analyst, I have the ultimate control over what occurs in this in the relationships. Some of the relationship diagrams get very, very large. We don't even try to render them if they're larger than, say, 25 or so data sets. For that reason, we've given you the ability to select over here. So I might say only show me the relationships around the the orders or the items table, and it would re-render the diagram just concentrating on those two. As such, you can sort of stepwise through your data sets, look at your diagram, review the strength of the relationships, and make decisions based off of that.